Hey guys, Amazing Ampharos here, picking back up with Final Fantasy IV The After Years. And I'm going into what is a very special segment. I've already completed all the individual character tales, and I've also completed The Gathering, where Team Golbez went around the world saving everyone from their problems. Everyone's now piled into the Lunar Whale, and we're giving chase to the mysterious girl to the final dungeon. As soon as we arrive at the final dungeon, which will happen after these cutscenes, we're going to be presented with the character select screen, and we're going to have to pick a party of 5 out of 20 possible choices. There could be up to 22 if you saved Kalka and Brenna, but I did not. And in Final Fantasy IV The After Years, only characters in your active battle party gain experience from battle. So whichever 5 characters you choose are pretty much for keeps. And while you might think it's just the final battle and maybe you can rearrange things a bit if you have a difficulty, that's not really how it works. The final dungeon is a behemoth of a dungeon. It's close to 50 floors, and it's just packed full of bosses. Your party will grow substantially as you progress through the dungeon, and if you don't pick a party at the start that will grow into something that can win later on, you're going to be forced to grind. And with the levels I play at, where most of my characters are entering this at around level 20-something, that makes things all the more difficult. So for this segment, instead of just trying to plow through this as efficiently as possible, I'm really going to slow down and try to break down the choices for you guys. I'll talk about the correct things to think about when forming a party, and I'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of every character you might select. So hopefully if you're playing along at home, you can make an informed decision, even if you don't do exactly what I do here. Because there really are a lot of viable ways to build your party, but there are also a lot of wrong ways to build your party. So for the naive player, this can be a big trap. And as for these cutscenes here, I can sum them up real quickly. We get to see how Cecil's having real personal issues with the whole Dark Knight thing, being possessed, yada yada yada. Cecil's friends and family are really concerned about him, but he's not in a very talkative mood right now. All the while, the other characters are really concerned about this whole moon thing, and we run into some weird trouble with gravity that doesn't actually make any physical sense. Cecil gets all upset because I guess he doesn't like going to the moon, and then we're going to be moving on. And even though I'm not at the party select screen yet, so I'm not quite ready to go, I will also refer you guys. In the video description for this video, I'm going to include a bunch of tables that will show you statistical potential of the characters. Because, of course, the big thing about picking characters is you're going to want to pick characters who grow into something strong, but it's not always obvious which characters grow better or worse from the outset. Level 50 is about an appropriate endgame level. When it's all said and done, that's about where every character is going to land. Characters with high base levels like Golbez will end up a little bit ahead of characters with low base levels like Porom, but the experience curves a curve, so it really does about even out in the end. Now, I don't believe stats should be the end-all of which characters you pick. You have to look at overall functionality. But stats really are an important informative fact. In general, the strongest characters tend to have many high stats, and the characters with bad stats across the board are pretty much universally bad. Yet this scene doesn't make any sense at all, but neither did Yang's sailboat running out of fuel, so whatever. The important part is we're getting to the moon. Okay, here we go. When the dust settles, you find yourself with Ceodore alone, and everyone else is really injured, but they're all okay. And you can talk to anyone to get to that coveted party select screen. I'm going to go with Kain because he's close and he's Kain. And from here, you see the full roll of characters. And you'll see Ceodore's in a special place by being in your party by default, but he's actually not forced at all. So you can replace him with whoever you want, and I'm going to make a decision that should surprise absolutely no one. I feel as though out of all the characters, Golbez is really the one indispensable character. Golbez has amazing base stats for a character in the lower 30s. Comes with all the Aga spells, and for that matter, at level 34, he is going to be your highest level functional character. It is theoretically possible to make it through the final dungeon without Golbez, but you would have to have gained considerably more levels up until this point in the game than I have. If you enter the final dungeon in a situation like I am, Golbez is not just helpful, he is required. But Golbez is not a sufficient victory condition by himself. As mighty as he is, our campaign to seize back the crystals and save the world is not going to succeed with just Golbez. You'll need 4 companions to follow him, 4 minions, or even 4 fiends if you will. So, who will follow Golbez into the heart of the final dungeon? I'll say the very first thing you need to ask yourself when constructing a party is, who is my healer going to be? We've already seen throughout the game that, in general, when your party has a good white mage, your party is way more functional than when it doesn't. And there are really only 2 viable white mages available in the in-game party. And that's Rosa and Porom. Now, if you go down to that statistical comparison, you'll see really quickly that Rosa outclasses Porom in almost every stat. Porom has more MP, Rosa's better on every other stat. You'll also note that Porom comes at level 15, and Rosa comes at level 30. If you really dig into it, you'll even see that Rosa's level learning for spells is overall probably a little better than Porom, so it's really close. But I'm going to pick Porom anyway. And that probably seems insane, because I've just made what I think is a very persuasive argument for why Rosa is better. The reason I'm using Porom is because there's one thing she has that really helps her a lot. At the end of the final dungeon, there's an optional boss you can beat that allows you to keep double cast to your choice of 3 characters, either Palom, Porom, or Leonora. If you choose Porom and have a white mage with double cast, your party's survival just goes through the roof. And while you aren't going to need this at all to make it through the story, it will be a huge leg up against the post-game optional bosses. Double cast could be well spent on Palom as well, you'll get a different kind of power, but I'm going to be aiming to give it to Porom. A third viable option that my cursor is hovering over here is Edward. Edward doesn't fit the mold of a white mage. He has no free way to heal at all, actually. But his solve ability lets him throw 5 of any random healing item he wants to the party. Solve X potions with the benefit of the economical ring heal the entire party for 4,000 HP with no cast time. With the only downside being that you use 5 X potions. You're quickly going to see that X potions are very, very expensive, so you're going to need to grind quite a bit of money if you want to rely on Edward for this purpose. Though early on you can solve high potions, which economical ring 1,000 HP at top will actually be very potent. And you can also solve things like Phoenix Downs and remedies, so Edward is really diverse like that. So if you feel like putting in the extra time to grind some money, Edward in the long run does have the greatest potential of any healer, so I feel like I have to mention it. However, if you play at the kind of levels I like to play at, it's just not practical. So, now we need 3 more characters, and my thinking is about the way you have to set a formation. Your party in Final Fantasy IV always has at least 2 characters in the front, 2 in the back, and then a 5th that can go either way. Porom as a white mage is obviously going to be a back row character, and Golbez will be a back row character for a while, but later on he actually really makes use of his physical abilities that might want to come up front. So it's smartest to think of Golbez as taking up that 5th slot and go either way. So we have 2 front row slots and 1 back row slot that still need filled. And I'm going to start from the back row, as there are really 2 very strong choices that lead the pack. That's Rydia and Palom. Rydia and Palom are both dedicated offensive mages. Rydia's faster, all of Palom's other stats are better. Rydia's immediately useful in their summons. Palom will be basically a burden on your party until he hits level 41 and gets the Agas. And once he does, stacking his bluff ability with the Agas will give him an offensive magic output that Rydia can't match, even with Leviathan Baham, which yes, she does eventually get that. Personally, I feel as though Rydia is the stronger choice, because she has immediate utility, and even in the long run, she's not really that much worse than Palom. You're certainly not going to lose boss fights because your magic damage output is just a little bit lower. So I feel very good about this choice, but if you go with Palom, you're not making a foolish decision. He really can be a very powerful character. And then we have our front row characters, and I'm going to pick 2 characters who you've already seen have incredible potential, Kain and Edge. Kain is just an amazing character in Final Fantasy IV the After Years. Since he promoted to the Holy Dragoon at level 20, his HP and MP stats have ridiculous potential, and all of his other stats are really high. He's one of the fastest characters, he's one of the strongest characters, he's one of the most durable characters. There is literally nothing bad about Kain. And I really do feel like he just outclasses every other physical character in this game. Edge, on the other hand, is one of the fastest characters, has overall close to the best damage output of any physical character, and middling durability, which isn't perfect, but alongside the other amazing offerings he has, is great. And Edge has a unique equipment pool to the other heavier physical characters like Kain and Golbez, so you're getting all that without a cost to your team's resources. And Edge furthermore is really nice because his smoke ability will let you run from random encounters so much more quickly and easily than you could otherwise. You could rely on one of the white mages or teleports, but you have to wait a while before they learn it, and even then, white mages are slow. Edge is fast. Do the math. Edge is just a convenient character to have in your party who also performs excellently. Now, if you just mirror my team, you're going to have a recipe for success. You can just look at these characters and you see power and potential. But that's not to say that everyone else is bad. In fact, many of these other characters are viable. I'll just run down the line. I'll probably spend a bit more time on the ones that are good and a bit less on the ones that are not so good. Ceodore is really interesting. His biggest problem is he's really frail. He needs to get to a pretty high level to start to have survival capabilities, but he does eventually kind of catch up, and he's able to equip a lot of the best armors, which really helps mitigate his frailty. And he's also really fast and has a pretty respectable strength stat. So I find a good way to utilize Ceodore is to give him a bow and arrow and stick him in the back row. If you don't want to use an offensive caster at all, you can throw Ceodore back there, rely on archery to get some supplemental damage instead of spell casting. You still have Golbez for spell casting against enemies that are just optimally taken down with magic. And you can use his white magic abilities to help back up your primary white mage with some handy support moves and occasionally healing. While he's not really good enough to be a primary healer, he can single target a healing spell at the same time your main white mage multi-targets it, and whoever he targets will basically get healed twice. His single targets are approximately equal in power to a white mage's multi-targets, so it's just good enough to be useful. Unlike what Cecil and Kain tend to do with Kira, which is nothing useful at all. Speaking of Cecil, he's probably immediately appealing because he comes at level 40, which is a crazy high level, and he's a known good character. But the big downside to Cecil is he's still not really ready to fight. All of his stats are fixed at level 10 until he regains his true self, which, I'm sorry, spoilers, happens about halfway through the final dungeon. at which point he becomes a good character, but I still feel as though in the long run he statistically underperforms Kain and Egg. Cecil is still very good, and one way you can really use him is to not put him in your party now, but just rely on the fact that level 40 is such a high base level that even halfway through the final dungeon, he'll still be worth putting in your party. So if, for instance, you're really resentful over the fact that Golbez is basically forced, you could use Golbez for now and plan on subbing Cecil or later. Alternatively, 2,400 HP and the cover ability makes him a meat wall even if all his stats are awful, and he can't really contribute anything with his turns. So you could just use him as a meat wall while your other characters grow. He'll get even further ahead in level. When he regains his true self, he'll be a really powerful character who's so far ahead in level no one will ever catch up to him, and that can be your angle to make him successful. I've already covered Rosa, highly interchangeable form. Sid. Don't use Sid. All of his stats are bad, especially his speed. He's just as slow as Palom. He does way less damage than Palom. I don't really know what they were thinking with this character. He has no role in an endgame team at all. Yang. Yang is really good, actually. All of his stats other than speed are high, and speed is middling. It's a bit deceptive because he relies on the claw weapons, which give him different damage calculations, but overall he'll still be a high-power, high-defense character who's just a bit held back by the fact that his equipment doesn't bulk him up as much as someone like Kain can. He does have a nice rounded selection of abilities, too. Cover counter is overall just plain superior to Cecil's version of cover. And focus can let you have a lot of fun with, well, focusing for damage. I'm not going to be using Yang, but he will not hold you back at all if you do. Luca. Luca is kind of like Sid, but better. That is to say, she's worse than all of the other non-Sid physical characters, but she's not so much worse that she's going to just sabotage your party like Sid did. I have to strongly recommend against her, because really the only thing she has going for her is durability, and even at that, Kain or Yang outclass her. But she is usable if you just really like her a lot for some reason. Ursula. Ursula's kind of funny because she's across the board inferior to Yang in almost every way, but she's really fast. And due to her equipment options, that speed ends up taking kind of an interesting twist. Because with optimal equipment, she ends up way faster than every character, even the ninjas. So you end up with a physical character who's kind of frail and doesn't output damage at the greatest rate or an okay rate, but it just double turns everything, which makes Ursula a lot of fun to use. I don't think she's really all that high tier of a character, but she's good enough, and she really is fun. So don't feel too bad if you want to give her a shot as one of your front runners. Leonora. Don't use Leonora. She's terrible. She doesn't learn any of the Agas until the late level 70s. And it's pretty much the case that in the final dungeon, spells weaker than the Agas have no utility whatsoever. So she's a pure white mage until a level way higher than you'll ever reach. And she's just a terrible white mage compared to Porom and Rosa. Even if you do grind her to those crazy high levels, all of her stats are just bad. She's underperformed all of the other mages at their specialties, and I don't think having access to a lot of different spells really makes up for using all of them badly. I cannot recommend Leonora in good faith game. Gekkou. Gekkou's kind of a funny character. He's really bad to start out, but he grows really well. All of his stats end up well above average, other than speed, which ends up slightly above average, and is compounded by the fact that all the ninja equipment he gets access to can end up giving him all sorts of static speed buffs. So Gekkou basically ends up being a powerful stat wall. But the downside to Gekkou is he comes at level 14, And he is competing for some of that ninja equipment from Edge, with some of those heavy weapons with characters like Kain. And all of his command abilities are really terrible, so he's pretty much just going to be attacking and using items. Still, he really does have some potential, and if you want to use one of the apprentices, I strongly recommend you making him. Zangetsu. Zangetsu's just an awful character. All of his stats are bad, which is really all I should have to say about him. He has by far the highest intellect of the apprentices, though it's still way too low to make him a dedicated caster, especially given that he only gets 2 offensive spells. You'll really do better leaving Zangetsu back behind on the Lunar Way. Izayoi. Everything bad I just said about Zangetsu goes double for Izayoi. She has no conceivable role in the team. All of her stats are bad, her equipment options are bad, her command ability is terrible. I can't fathom why you would want to add Izayoi to your team, other than the fact that you think her being a female ninja is cool. Yeah, Izayoi, you're real cool, but I prefer to win. Tsukinowa. Tsukinowa is kind of a disappointing character for me, because he seems really strong when you play Kain, or Edge's tail rather. The problem is that Tsukinowa is trivially faster than Edge. All of his other stats are worse than Edge's to a significant extent. And he has to share exactly the same equipment pool with Edge, and you just don't get enough good stuff later on to split between them. So, using Edge and Tsukinowa at the same time is a recipe for disaster. And if you're only going to use one, you clearly get a better performance out of Edge than Tsukinowa, so there is no reason to use Tsukinowa at all. Harley. Don't use Harley. She comes at level 5. Even if she came at level 50, she'd still be worthless. All of her stats are bad. All of her abilities are bad. Everything about her is bad. I have nothing good to say about this character. Leave her out of your party. Not shown here are Kalka and Grin. I don't have them because I said they wouldn't be useful, and I'll just tell you they are not useful. Not only are all their stats bad, and Kalka's command ability is worthless, Grinna's dance is actually pretty good. But none of it matters because their equipment pool is completely unique to them. They can't equip any of the stuff you find normally in the final dungeon, or anything you imported from other tales. Those clown's clothes were great in how fast they made Grinna. Those clown's clothes are the only armor she's ever going to get, unless you grind the incredibly rare phase armor drops late in the final dungeon. Not only does that involve waiting until late in the final dungeon, those are rare drops for equipment that only Kalka and Grinna can get. Now, if you actually go through all the trouble to grind full sets of phase gear for those, and you get into the trouble in the first place to grind the lethal items needed to save both of them, and you level them all up substantially because they come at terrible base levels, you'll get some of the best characters in the game. But for the amount of trouble it takes to get Kalka and Grinna at those power levels, you can just grind levels for your main party using characters other than Kalka and Grinna to become way stronger than is necessary to beat the game. So that was really a long-winded way of me saying, don't use Kalka and Grinna. So, one thing I didn't talk about when talking about parties and bands, and that was very much on purpose. You probably have seen the band mechanic and are thinking about how you should be using characters in sync to get powerful bands that can help you out this way, that way, who works well with whom. I'm just going to tell you, don't bother. When it comes to efficient late-game parties, by and large, you want a party that can flexibly deal with any character dying at any time. The bosses are very powerful, and most of the best characters really work well by themselves, and most of the bands just under-damage what strong characters doing strong things can do independently. There are a couple team setups you could use that have powerful bands that could maybe make a difference. But, by and large, I would not worry about bands, and then any that happen to be available to the team you're choosing are just an added bonus. And that's about it. I'm not ready to leave quite yet. I'm actually going to set my party to the 5 characters I'm not using who have equipment I want to steal, because I'm ever the kleptomaniac when it comes to equipment theft. And then after I script them, I'm going to go and say. No matter who you decide to use, I would strongly recommend stripping everyone you're not using. Because again, characters you don't use are going to fall hideously far behind. So whoever's not in your party, right now you can pretty much count on never having any use for you at all. It's kind of harsh, but at the very least you have such freedom right now that overall, I'd say this design is good. And of course, you always want to be sure to equip everyone with the best stuff they get access to. Not obviously and there's a save point and a free end down at the bottom of the lunar whale that I'm going to make use of right now. And I will be back with you guys next time as I attempt to tackle the behemoth of the final dungeon that this game offers.